Thank you, Marilee.
Thank you, Marilee.
We'd like to welcome everybody from the AACG and thank you all for your support throughout the years. It's been an incredibly challenging time for artists and galleries and museums, and we appreciate all the support that you give. And special thanks to you, Marilee, for your invitation and for creating this program, which has been really essential for so many to keep in touch during this time. We're really pleased to have Monica Guggisberg and Philip Baldwin join us today from their studio in Wales. We're honored to represent Philip and Monica and share this incredible exhibition of their work at our gallery here in Stockbridge. This is the first feature exhibition that we've given them, and we appreciate all the effort that they've made throughout this pandemic. They've been able to continue creating work. Monica and Philip have been together for 40 years since they were together at Orfors in Sweden. They create elegant, sublime forms, very disciplined, developing overlay techniques with Italian cut techniques, cut glass. And their work over time, over the years, has been focused more on larger scale projects, conceptual projects for museums, and socially motivated projects, which are very important during this time. They've collaborated with Steuben and Vanini and had numerous solo exhibitions throughout the US and Europe. And their museum collections include the Museum of Art and Design in New York City, the Chrysler Museum, the Corning Museum, the Hokkaido Museum in Japan, the Decorative Arts Museum of the Louvre, the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, and the Museum Bellerive in Zurich, to name a few. Among the recent highlights in their career is a large-scale installation that they did in 2018 at the Canterbury Cathedral in England, which was called Under an Equal Sky. And this was really an important highlight of their career, a major undertaking, and we'll take a look at that later in the presentation. Right now, they have a solo exhibition at the Glasmuseet in Ebeltoft, Denmark, called Walking the Void. And that brings us to this first image, which is an image of an outdoor piece that they've created. And I'll let Philip or Monica, if you'd like to begin, you may want to explain about this piece, and welcome. And thank you again.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim and Kim. We are thankful. We really appreciate and love that we have a show with you. And thank you for this introduction, of course, to Marilee. So we are looking at The Visitor, which is outside of the museum, and the show is called Walking in the Void. And go on.
Okay. Well, just a little bit of background. The show was to have opened in April and did not, for the obvious reasons, and we assumed it wouldn't open until, well, we didn't really know, but we figured maybe September. But Denmark was quite comparatively calm, and they began to reopen already in June, and they called us about 2 weeks before they wanted to open the show and said, can you come through and do it in June? And we were already pretty prepared for April. So we did, and we actually went up to Denmark for 2 weeks in June and set up this show. And the show was conceived months and months before coronavirus had been heard of, but it has to be admitted there's a kind of synchronicity between the perplexing nature of what we're all going through and some of the implications of this exhibition. And in any event, it opened in June, and that comet, the sculpture that you saw in the water piece there is called The Visitor, and it's meant to symbolize a comet visiting Earth.
And I also want to say it was possible to do this exhibition when lockdown happened in the UK, our two assistants, they came up, they moved in with us. We have a large house and they took over the top floor and we just kept on working. So for 3 months, basically, we didn't go off the property except for one person, me usually, to get the food. And we just stayed here and kept working. And it is an incredible privilege. So we did finish the show for Ebeltoft. And then he came back and said, ooh, we have to finish the show for Schantz Galleries.
Yeah.
For sure.
We go to the next
Shall we go to the next?
Yeah. So this, if we hold that one a second.
The previous one?
No, this one is
And
good.
this one is the 7 days of the week. And one doesn't really realize it, but Sunday, there's the sun and the moon. Sunday, Monday, moon day. Tuesday, it's Mardi, Mars. And Mercury is for Wednesday, mercredi in French, or mercoledì in Italian. And Jupiter is for jeudi, Thursday. And Venus is for Friday, vendredi. And then Saturn stands for Saturday. So you have sun, moon, and the 5 planets. So that makes the 7 days of the week.
This is the first known representation of time. It's, I think, considered that this has been the mark of time going back to the dawn of civilization. And it's a kind of symbol of the ground on which we stand. And this whole installation is designed to sort of honor and represent our local universe. And the steel rods that you see through this picture represent the 12 signs of the Zodiac, with some planets in amongst them. And just a last detail about the 7 days of the week. How did that come up? It's because it's the sun and the moon and the 5 visible planets.
And can we go to the next slide?
Next, yeah.
This is a destination unknown. It's basically a comet coming down to Earth with meteorites in it. And it happens all the time, but we don't know where they hit and when they hit. So it's sort of a reflection of, that's part of our universe. And, it's part of our world, even though we're just tiny in it.
I don't know if any of you ever read The New Yorker, but several months ago, there was a priceless cartoon of 2 dinosaurs having lunch. And in the background, there's a comet. And one dinosaur is looking up slightly nervous at the comet. And the other dinosaur, who's eating his sandwich or whatever, says, don't worry about that. It's always been there.
But did you see the other one about the good Lord talking to somebody who's giving him an update on the world, and they sort of, something is wrong and so on. And well, we have to reset it, call the comet.
Yeah. All right.
Here's the detail.
This is, it's fun to look at these details because even though this installation it's 5 meters, well, what did we figure it was? 65 feet by about 40 feet in size. But in fact, it's a wonderful concept because it's very adaptable for spaces of any size. You could do it on a smaller scale. And the fittings are sort of, they'll work for any circumstances.
They're custom made by our little old friend in Switzerland, whom we have been working with all our metal finishings and combinations and fittings, and he's absolutely brilliant.
The engineering is really quite incredible on these pieces. Can you talk a little bit about the material? There's glass, of course, for the comets, the other material?
Our glass, and then the other pieces are rocks that we found around our property, which of course,
on the beach as well, I think. A few
yes,
the rivers.
They're meant to represent meteors. They're not, in fact, meteors. And the little fixings are actually inside those fixings. It's screwed into the wall, and then the little aluminum tube fits over it, and you can see, I can't do a pointer, but you can see there's a little kind of black spot underneath, which is a little Allen key nut.
So you can
And
pivot it.
You can pivot the piece any way and lock it into place.
And there you're looking through your installation in the center of the gallery.
That's right.
Yes.
At the
That's right.
your installation.
And the space is, the exhibition space at Ebeltoft is a very difficult space. There are a lot of passages. It's tall and narrow, really. So the only way we just had, okay, we'll have to have a three-dimensional experience. So we just took over the space, you know, in all top, up and down and sides and everywhere.
What's nice is the galaxy essentially binds the whole building together. So the building in itself is part of the sculptural space. And
Yes.
it was a nice way to try to, as we said, represent our local universe.
And also, you see on the left, you see the monoliths, and they're sort of representative of us humans in all our different, you know, shapes. You know, here we are, but what's important, we are totally oversized in comparison to the universe. That's, you know, we're witnesses watching the universe, but we're taking ourselves a little, maybe too serious sometimes. That's why we're a little oversized there.
That's a little bit unfair to these pieces. Ebeltoft is a glass museum. And when we presented this exhibition and our plan and all, and they said, gosh, you are going to show some glass, aren't you? And I said, of course we are. And, so these pieces, which are very integral to the show, they are outsized, but we also wanted to show that blown glass, in spite of all these other elements, is very much our thing.
And also, I forgot the footnote, on top they have a gallery on the top, a passageway, where we put a little retrospective of other pieces we have done, vessels, you know, design work, and so we are legitimate in the glass.
What's impressive is the scale of these. You don't necessarily get that idea from the photo, but these are quite
Yes,
large.
Yes, they stand over a meter tall.
Right.
The tall ones there are probably 1.10 meters. What's that? 3.5 feet, I guess. A nice detail. The Ebeltoft is a seaport and a tourist destination because of its maritime history. And next to the museum, across from the museum, you saw in the very first picture a large sailing ship, which is part of a wonderful living museum where they repair wooden boats and they're constantly doing restoration work on the ship. And they gave us these beautiful oak pedestals for these pieces. It just works really nicely.
Beautiful. I love this picture.
Yeah, I do
really
too.
love this photo.
Yeah, sorry, it's 10.
And they're really about presence, those pieces. Here, there's the Pilgrim's boat.
So
We have a long history with boats, and we are nomads ourselves. I mean, we've lived in 4 different countries ourselves, and even, you know, I think I'll let you tell that one.
well, we started doing boats about 10 years ago, very much as an autobiographical element about ourselves. We both of us had childhoods with parents who did a lot of sailing, so we grew up in boats and we're always sailing, and that extended into adult life, sailing with our children and so forth, combined with the fact that we're wanderers. We're 3 years in Sweden learning to blow glass, and then 20 years in Switzerland, 15 years in Paris, and now this next adventure here in Wales. So there's a kind of very personal element in these boats. In the case of this boat was actually made for Canterbury Cathedral, where we did a series of 10 installations 2 years ago. And I think we'll talk maybe a bit more about that later on.
Yes.
But this is the one piece that we took from Canterbury to have in this show. And it's not really in the show proper. It's at the
local
absolutely beautiful little local church in Ebeltoft. But it's very emblematic of pilgrimage, people going on voyages.
And you'll see later when you see the other pieces, they are sort of personage. And the other pieces you see in the show at the Schantz Galleries are also sort of impersonating these figures.
Yeah, these are, just to give you an idea, this boat is
3 meters long.
3 meters long, was about 14 feet.
And they're 28.
And there are 28 of these pieces, and they're all about between 75 and a meter in height.
And here you see a good detail of the textures that we apply through cutting.
Or we get maybe
we could
talk
do that
about
later.
that when we go on to. I think, did we go next to about the?
Yes.
Is the boat metal or wood?
This one is metal. We have done wooden boats, but they used to be smaller. The wooden boats were smaller, but this is metal. We've done them also in copper. We've done them in brass.
Bronze too. I think. No.
Yeah, and yeah.
Silver.
Yeah, we've done a silver one, yes.
Just one last detail that's fun about the boats. We kind of came up with a sort of generic shape to the boat. And so whether they're this size or only a meter in size or 50 centimeters in size, they are proportionally all the same. And that's fun to remember when we get to the pictures about Canterbury.
And there are also other elements, like they are sitting in sand, which holds them in place. And of course, that goes back when we first started with doing objects into boats. There were amphors. And amphors have this pointed base because they were used to transport, oil, wheat, whatever. There used to be a container to transport goods across the oceans in boats. And they had sand in the boat, and they stuck the amphors in it so they wouldn't break in the sea.
That's great.
So in a way, that's sort of an evolution of the first amphors we did. But they contain still the symbolism of transport, might it be humans or goods.
It's very interesting about the scale aspect, because we have a piece in our gallery that you'll see in a moment that looks like it could be the same size as this, but it's about a third the size. And it's amazing how you're able to create that proportion with each one. So we'll move now to our exhibition at the gallery. And here's a panorama of the exhibition as it stands today. And you can see there are essentially, it's broken into the monoliths that we saw earlier, the black and gray and dark red pieces, the Species Novae series, which includes the boat as well. The boat includes those forms. And then the frame pieces. We have 2 of the frame pieces. You can see one on the wall in the center of the gallery.
It's such I've said this already, but it's such a beautiful shot. I hope we can, I want to have that shot and blow it up and put it on the wall. I think it's just, you've done a beautiful job setting up the show,
yes.
Jim and Kim. Really.
Yes.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Really happy.
We'll do it. I'm sorry.
Go
Just
ahead.
wanted to say quickly, we will be going from your studio photos to images of the pieces as they're set up in the gallery now. Okay, Philip.
I think I just wanted to make the point, which is a nice tie-in. All of these pieces, the pieces in this boat, the pieces you saw in Canterbury, and the vast majority of pieces in the exhibition are done in this incolmo technique, where you're joining 2 blown pieces of hot glass. All of the sort of heads in these pieces are joined hot to the body. And that technique replicates itself throughout the exhibition.
And you'll see some of that in the video that's being shown, coming up in a minute. You see the joining.
That's right. We're gonna, are you about now to do the video?
Yep.
Would you like to say a few words about it before we start?
So actually, what I just said directly relates to the video, because what you see in the video clip is the making of some of these smaller pieces that go into boats. And you get a very short panorama of the hot shop making pieces, and then moving on into the cold shop where they're being cut. And I think that's maybe all we need to say.
Yeah.
And yeah, we should mention we won't be able to talk during the video.
And it's short, so it won't be painful.
Perfect. Let me have a look.
Are we muted? Oh, no.
There we go. And we're back.
Ooh, nice detailed shot. Sweet.
Love the colors.
So that's a nice, to finish the video with this piece, which is called a Multicultural Celebration. And maybe you could say a few words about the inspiration for this piece.
Well, you want to do?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like the world, we're all nomads. I mean, if you look at everybody's history, I'm sure there are very few people say we've lived here for, 300 years in the same place and haven't moved, or parts of the family haven't moved. They're always, and you bring different countries. Look at the US, look where all the people are coming from, and it's a multicultural world, and I think we should celebrate it, and that's what we're doing with this idea. Celebrate the multiculturality because it adds value for everybody.
Jim, you had a lovely anecdote, seems to me, about this.
Just last week, we had a family come in. Their young daughter, who was probably 5 or 6 years old, looked at this piece and said, "This looks like a boat filled with many different types of people." And she got that without seeing the title. And it was really a touching moment to have that kind of appreciation. It really is. It's like this exhibition really does have a lot of that kind of joy, which we really need right now.
Mm.
Well, it's only fair that you and Kim deserve some credit for that, because when we were discussing all of this and the content of the show and number of pieces and all of that, and you said, for goodness sake, please be cheerful, think summer.
And I guess,
so we did try to think of it that way.
and especially in these times, I think people need some positive colors and thoughts and cheer. So, and we had fun. We were very cheerful making them too.
Not always.
It certainly, it comes through. It really does. And this looks so great with the daylight on it, and where we have it set in our window.
Yes, that's a thing I've remarked in your pictures, and I also remark it whenever I see pictures of, in collectors' homes, and you're watching the work, not in a sort of a white cube situation, but in front of windows, looking out on natural environments. And it like just there with the green pieces looking through to the outside. I don't know, somehow it expands the power of it.
Yes, and I think also people will hopefully live with these pieces, and they're not going to be in a white cube, but in an environment where they live and laugh and cry, whatever.
Yeah, I'll wait. I was going to say something else, but I'll wait. Yeah.
Okay.
This gives you a sense of the scale. Here you see Kim when we were installing the work, the monolith pieces. And these are actually done in 2 parts.
Yes.
That's right. The scale of our studio would not permit us, without ramping up in size and also in staff, to make those pieces in Calmo. They're simply too big. We'd have to build new equipment, and
We need more people.
We'd need more people. We'd need to change the scale of the way we operate, and we don't want to do that. It's a wonderful thing to do. Lots of people do that, but we wanted to keep our intimate little situation with 2 assistants. And so by doing these in 2 parts and fitting the upper part into the lower part, it allows us to achieve that size without having to change the way we work.
And I actually like the idea that they're not in 1 part. I like the idea that they're assembled and sort of, you could also imagine that it's a head, but, sometimes the heads are not necessarily fixed to the body all the time, not even with people.
So the mind and the body, or the...
No. I mean, just, sometimes people, their head is a little bit somewhere else, Anyway.
They're beautifully fitted together too. The way that you've engineered these to work together is really terrific.
I agree, but Monica's right. It is I hadn't quite thought of it that way, but it is somehow an additional part of the mystique of the pieces that they are in 2 parts. Yeah. These 3 that you've seen the ones in Canterbury.
In Ebeltoft.
I mean, not Canterbury, excuse me. I meant to say Ebeltoft. And there are very few of them that we've made. It's the beginning of a new body of work, really.
And they're very much about presence, and that's why there are very few that are carved, that are, battuted, cut, because I think it's very important that the presence and the size and shape of it is the first impression you get.
They almost seem to evoke other materials too. There's the sense of, or the feeling of stone.
They're less dependent on their glassiness than certainly most of our work, and we did consciously choose to make them opaque. The red color that you see is a red that we've created by combining a couple of different colors together, just layered each together, one over the other. So it could be ceramics, actually, almost. I mean, you don't necessarily know that it's glass.
Well, we really got drawn to them when we first installed them here. I walked into the gallery after Jim had set them up, and my reaction was, wow, those are so big. There's so much you can't really appreciate until you're around most art and sculpture, but to see them set up here in life really was impressive. And they do have a strong presence. You know, there's something there, spirit or something.
Wonderful. Good. We like to hear that. The unidentical twins. Well, I suppose it's important to say that all the pieces in the show individually for sale, but Monica and I do have our prejudices, and so we do group these pieces. We do see them as families. In a few cases, we've actually said they have to be sold as pairs, or we've even had some where we had 5 that we've kept together as a single unit. In the case of these pieces, the title is The Unidentical Twins. So if someone were to buy one piece, I guess we'd say they got an unidentical twin. we love the idea of the two together. Yeah.
And this is a detail where you can see the joining. There's the encalmo, and of course, cutting. All of our pieces are cut. They're all cold worked. And we have been doing Battuto since 1994. And I dare to say that we were, some of the first to actually taken it further. It was used to be pretty much in the hands of Venini, where Carlos Scarpa in the 30s started to do Battuto, and it was all the surface, no deeper cutting. It was very sort of mildly textured. And when we were introduced to Paolo Ferro, who passed away in the meantime, and he was a master cutter, and we just went crazy. Basically, wow, we can do so many things. And we go to Paolo and said, Paolo, what do you think? Can we do this? And he sort of looked at us really quizzical and said, non lo so, abbiamo mai fatto, proviamo. We've never done it, let's try. And it was so fun to explore the different techniques. And in the beginning, we did we did overlays.
Wait to do that.
Okay, we'll do that later. We'll do that later.
We can go to the next slide.
That's nice.
Give you a sense of scale. And then this, we see the work with the overlay up close as it's installed in the gallery.
Okay.
In our earlier work, which I think went on for a long time, starting with this cutting in the 90s, and we did these vase forms, and it employs what's called Swedish overlay. It's layering color over color with clear glass in between. And so I suppose our signature has been this Swedish overlay with the Italian cutting, where you're cutting through the layers to expose colors underneath.
And in the beginning, we only had a very thin layer of colors on the outside. And the cutting was very delicate and very, very thin cuts. And we made patterns and structure that way. And then over the year, we started to add another layer of transparent glass. And that's what you see here at the bottom.
If you have do you have a detail of this by any chance?
We have it right there.
That's great. So, because in Swedish overlay, you take one ball of glass and you literally superimpose it over another, like putting on a sock, if you will. And so the color is then turned inside out and exposed on the exterior of the form. But in these cases, we then have gathered clear glass over the surface color so that when you cut, you don't immediately take the color away. You have to dig deep into the thickness of the glass in order to reach the inner color. And that allows you to get all of this quite deep texture.
And that is very, very tactile. I mean, you sort of, like the top is gentle and soft, and then the bottom is much stronger in its personality of cutting.
Does that make sense? I'm never quite sure.
Absolutely. That was great. It's really interesting to see how you're exploring these different textures, and it's like different languages or different types of brushing within.
And some of the cuts we've done, we actually designed new wheels. So we basically, okay, we want to do a specific cut. So you want to have a specific angle or a different, a square wheel or whatever. So you could achieve what we wanted to do with it.
Yeah.
And we have funny names for our cuts too. We have very silly names.
But these Incolmo pieces, we started doing them maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and we only did them with undercolor. There was no overlay because we felt already that the pieces were quite complex and would be in color. So the overlay that you're seeing here, this is the first time we've done this in this work. Your exhibition is the first time these have been shown.
We thank you for that.
Thank you for allowing us to do it.
It's always nice. It really is great to be able to debut a new series, a new interpretation of your series.
And it's fun the way these things work. I mean, we started out making wine glasses in our studio 40 years ago. And it's dominoes. These things just evolve and you go forward and then you add this. And so our work has changed a lot over the years, but when we look at it, we see this thread that runs through it.
I would say that one of the things that we are probably steady for is that we've always expand. I mean, that we never sort of stick with one thing and just do it over and go into every last detail, but that we use where we are, the pieces where we are, and then we incorporate them in our next history, in our next step. And as Philip just said, if you look at our work from the beginning, you actually can see, if you really know it, you can see a thread going through. But
Yeah. So a comment here, because when Jim said, think summer, well, there you go. Those were, I think, among the first pieces we did for the show. And if you look at the titles of these pieces, some of them are personages, if you will, and some of them are emblematic of situations in nature. And that may seem contradictory, but
Heading for Sunset.
But in fact, we're a part of nature. So whether it's personages or symbolism around nature, nature isn't out there and we're somewhere else. We're in nature together with what's going on in nature.
Well, we are part of nature. We are nature as well.
Exactly.
Separated.
Exactly. And that's what we hope is another element of this exhibition that celebrates the oneness of that.
This piece was actually quite, we took the wrong color on the inside. It was a mistake. And first we thought, oh, that doesn't work. But if it really, the longer you look at it, because we had it out and we sort of, oh, should we not? And then we started cutting and we started looking at it. And it has grown on us very much because you have to look twice and then you sort of get the depths of the different colors in it.
Jim or Kim, is it possible to do a detail on that just for fun?
Yeah, you can just see.
You can just see the. Does it work if I do that?
No.
Okay.
No,
never mind. Okay. What happened is that the color overcolor is a mistake, and it's too light.
It's the green.
That's right. Yeah. So you get the color differentiation is very slight.
It is beautiful, however.
And this is a great juxtaposition with the window, nature outside, which we're able to do here. And the way the daylight really plays off of the textures.
These guys are looking out at nature that's in them, that's on them, that nature's looking at them, who they are, like what you just said.
Exactly.
I love
Nice.
it.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's a merge. Those cuts are known in Italian as seme. What does seme mean?
Seeds.
Seeds.
Boy, Philomena did a wonderful job.
We should point something out.
Yes.
Not only, I mean, we work together with 2 assistants, and it happens that the 2 assistants that we have right now have become wonderfully adept at cutting glass. And that is important to know. As you all know, glass is almost always a case of teamwork. And it's one of the joyful things about it.
We have a question. What are the pieces finished with after they are cold worked?
We sometimes use, what is it called? Liquid luster, 1 layer, just slightly. And we use a sort of a greasy paste. I mean, greasy sounds very awful. It's basically, I should say,
Well, it's
precious oil.
oil.
And we brush it on, and then we wipe it off with a non-fiber cloth.
Yeah.
Or we brush it on with a soft, brush, and it works very well. I mean, you don't want to use, you don't want to go after it with hot water and soap and scrub it all off, but it works.
It's to make a sort of primitive analogy, it's like polishing your shoes. So that the lubricant goes into the grain of the glass after it's been cut.
Because it's slightly porous because of the cutting. So that will sort of fill the pores. It's also like you put a
cream on your skin.
But I think I like the shoe polishing. We like shiny, polished matte, shall I say.
Yeah, yeah.
And we also have a question about the time. How much time does it take to cold work it? And are you doing the cold work, or is this solely your assistants doing the cold work?
You can answer that, Monica, but I just have to say one thing. I'm 73 years old, and it's taken 73 years to make this exhibition.
No, we have our assistants, we train them to do the cutting. And I mean, there's just 24 hours in the day, and we already do more than our 8 hours a day. So
we couldn't possibly do this work if we had to do it all ourselves.
And in the beginning, when we were in Switzerland, when we started to develop the cutting, we used to take the pieces, hand carry them down to Venice. And one of us would be there and work with Paolo and say, do it this way, do it that way, can we do it a little different, etc., and so on. And then when we were in Paris, in the beginning, we still did that. And then we shipped them. But of course, every time, one of us had to go on site and be there and stay there and be sure things were done the way we wanted, and we could develop new things and breathe down their neck. They could stand us about for 3 days, and then they were so exhausted, they just wanted to have us out the door.
But a nice thing, what we discovered bit by bit is that, of course, we ourselves became really informed and involved in the cutting and gradually we built our own cold shop bit by bit. And what we realized is cutting, you can learn glass cutting quite quickly. So we realized we could train ourselves, we could train our assistants, and
you have the
bit by bit we were able to manage that all in-house.
And I think if you have the right attitude, and the assistants who come to us, they come with the understanding that they're going to do cold work. They like to do it. They like to explore it. And it's a nice counterbalance to the hot glass. I mean, the hot glass is you can't touch it, everything moves, it's hot and sweaty. And then you have in the cold shop and you just concentrate on your work and you really get into it and have finished, you know, you can really see the progress and you can touch it. And it's very satisfying.
Over the 10 years since we've been doing the cutting ourselves, for the most part, we've never had anyone come who didn't love to learn to cut and do cutting. Very satisfying activity.
So we're planting seeds with our assistants.
And those areas that are like right near where the encamo is joined and so precise, the person doing the work has to be really, really skilled just to keep that all in one piece.
Absolutely.
And the one piece on the left, for instance, where you get too close to the encamo, and with some of the ones that you have to change the wheel because it's too narrow and you can't really access it unless you change the wheel and get to one so you don't hurt the other part.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about how you create the surface on the bottom portion of this pair?
Yeah, it's basically just satinade on what do you call that? A band.
But you try to get a band that's used, so you get the soft, not a rough one, so you get a soft, and you can vary that depending on how soft you want it, how delicate surface you want.
It's basically a kind of sandpaper on a belt with a waterfall coming down on it, so that you're always running water. Otherwise, the glass would get hot and it would break. And you can get it in very fine grades, so that satinade finish. Those are good examples. They have a very fine satinade finish. And that's the same thing that's being done with the big monolithic pieces.
We have a question about color. Do you make your own color or do you purchase it? And if you do, from where do you purchase your glass?
Well, we won't get too into that, but there's a fascinating backstory around glass color. It's an ancient medieval science that is practiced by very few companies in the world today.
Yeah, there are few.
And the sort of the most famous one is a company called Kugler in Germany.
Tell the story when you want to.
Well, it's an ancient sort of situation that comes very large, either out of Venice, they do all their own colors in Venice, and they batch their own colors. But if you're not in Venice, most of us are using color from one of 3 or 4 companies in the world that produce color. So to answer the question, no, we do not make our own color. And frankly, to achieve the quality that we get from Gaffer Glass or Kugler or Reichenbach, those are the 3 principal companies.
Also, it would be very limited. If you try to do our own colors, we would have to have color pots and so on. And it would be we wouldn't be able to play with the color palette that we use today. And we have samples. Well, no, you can't see them. But we have samples of every color we use that we blow out. And it's sort of like a palette. We can go around, okay, does this work together? No, well, etc. and so on. And if you do our own colors, it would be possible. We would be limited. We would be so limited.
There's probably about 100 colors to choose from. And it's very integral to the studio glass movement, because these companies, at least Kugler and Reichenbach, those companies date to the 19th century. And they make concentrated glass color in rods. And thanks to that, small studios like ours can have one furnace with clear glass and use these concentrated colors to do all these things.
You see, the colors are nice here.
And this is a great example of the range of color and your color choices. So this is one of the 2 frame pieces we have in the exhibition. And perhaps you could talk a little bit about the evolution of this series.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have been doing frames for actually quite a few years. And also
They started out of the boats, right? With amphora in the beginning.
yes, in the beginning, the first frames were filled, totally filled with one shape, and we played a little bit with the color. And then as we moved on, we started to sort of paintings or, you know, pictures into the frames and gave them more space, which of course highlights the shapes of it. And we have a pretty, you know, like shapes you see, they're all our favorite shapes. Basically, we have been using them for forever, you know.
Apropos what we were talking about earlier, the way work evolves and so forth, the frames, originally we had the boats were filled with amphora-like objects. And then we began to think, well, maybe we could study these objects and we could take them out of the boat and put them into a more two-dimensional context, which raises whole other possibilities of how you can place the work and integrate it into an environment and so forth. And that has evolved into these, we could say, in addition to being color studies, they're also quite concentrated studies, as Monica says, on forms that we love.
And these are, the two frames you're seeing are pretty much our sort of standard size, small and medium, but of course we've made frames larger size for commissions or for, you know, larger installations and so on, because they're very versatile. Yeah, I think we will.
Just a comment about this particular frame, because we made it expressly for this exhibition and to be in conversation with the pieces and the colors in the exhibition.
And we have a question. Do you do sketches ahead of time before you make the pieces?
It varies. It depends on what piece. Like the frames, we usually make sketches because there's so many different elements. But, you know, it's like with everything. You make a plan, then you probably, as you go along, you might change your plan. But the frames normally have sketches. The other pieces, it varies because also we are living, working together. So, you know, studio, the house is next door. And so sometimes you have a drink and you discuss a piece, or you doodle on the napkins and so on.
Just a detail, not only in the case of the frames, which are probably the most sort of, what shall I say, intellectually studied constructions. Often there are several sketches, but even when you do the sketches, if we probably blow at least twice and sometimes 3 times as many of pieces to arrive at that conclusion. Because even on paper and when three-dimensionally, there's a shift. Sometimes it's just right and sometimes it's another thing.
And so we have them in our studio hanging, we play around with them for a few days. And sometimes, you know, you discuss like, should this piece be in it, or should it be a little higher up, or should it come out? And sometimes you worry about one element in the frame for days.
That piece that's hanging there, I think we fussed over it for at least a month.
Wow.
It's great too. You can see how it's your way of hanging the piece suspended from wire. So it actually seems to float off the wall. It is floating in space, and you get great effects with the shadows too. You can really play with the light and shadows with the composition.
I like the way you've shadowed it.
It's a nice picture. It's the colors.
It is.
Everything
It's a
works.
great picture.
It's sort of very summer.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful.
It shows how integrated the exhibition is too. Your choices.
That orange ball on the left side, it really draws me because when I look at just that one element, it looks like there's a mirror behind it or inside of it, just the way the color and the cutting and everything is. It's really
Yeah, it almost has some uranium aspect to it. It really glows, that particular element.
Well, then you see those 3 those three pieces, those three orange pieces, they kind of like anchor the whole ensemble,
Mhm.
define it in some way.
The the compositions in the gallery, the groupings that we've made, were really something that we did. We decided with the individual pieces, but here you can appreciate some of the individual
Oh, good.
images,
Yeah,
your photos.
wonderful. But we liked what you did putting those two together. See, we hadn't thought about putting those two together, and you've placed them together in the show, and it works really nicely.
Here's another grouping. Works very well. They're individuals, and they have a dialogue going.
They do. What is the name of this one? Oh, sorry. Go on. That's all right. It comes back.
And
I have to say, one of my favorites.
Yours too. But that's not it's not green anyway.
No, we went to that a little.
the cutting on this is really wonderful.
This cutting is we call them the Vanini cuts. You know, we've designed with Vanini for many years, and the origin of modern cutting on glass really was, shall we say, brought into the 20th century by Carlo Scarpa, the Italian architect who did a lot of design work with Vanini in the 30s and 40s. And he was really the first person to use this cutting technique in an aesthetic sense. And these cuts are found, you can do them in deeper and
wider, depending on the wheel you use and how much color, you know, how much glass you have to work with. And
there are a whole
really
family of
that.
possibilities. Is that
room at the top?
Oh yes, room at the top. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh yes, it's right here. I see it. Yeah. I don't know why, but every now and then you do. I don't know. I guess everybody's different, but we don't come up with a title and then make the work. You make the work and then you grasp what its title should be, if that makes sense. And I don't know, we were looking at, and sometimes the piece and its title and its meaning all flow together all at once. But this piece, it sat there in our little gallery, and we were thinking, and then it's The Little Prince. It couldn't have another title as far as we're
One has that cutting on the top.
Have a little bit of a dialogue with seasons, like, you know, there's winter's light before you have all the really hot summer, and then you get into the winter, and you're going to get beautiful light from the winter.
Yeah, I really like that we have that range. There's some autumnal pieces in the show as well, like these.
Nice. Is this the? I think the one on the right is the winter solstice.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's winter light, winter solstice.
There, these pieces, you really get a nice sense of the texture of the deeper cutting.
Really beautiful. This one really has a feeling of wood, the cutting.
Yeah.
That beautiful.
That piece, that's another piece whose title, once you start to think about a theme like seasons and so forth, but that seemed to cover both the sense of season as well as the meaning of the season. The cutting you see on that piece, we were talking earlier about the surface cutting where you don't have clear glass, so it's very light cutting. That's what's going on there. It's been cut on the top just through directly the color. So it's a very fine inciso cutting.
A great title.
It really is. There's a lot of movement to it. It's almost animated. There's another
Nice.
gallery shot.
You have summer and winter and
Mhm.
fall.
Just around the corner.
This is the last image of the gallery, and now we're going to take a look at your project at Canterbury, and we thought we'd start with a short film on that before we. Would you like to say a few words before we show the film?
We actually did an exhibition with a gallery in Edinburgh 4 years ago. And we just moved here, and this gallery contacted us, and we researched a bit at the gallery, and we said, well, you're very nice folks, but you know, I think your gallery is too small. I don't think we can work with you. And he said, no, we'll do something special. I'll find a special location.
Wow.
Okay. And he called back a couple of days later and he said, would the cathedral do? Now, mind you, not Canterbury. And when he said, would the cathedral do up in Edinburgh, we said, sure, that sounds good. So to make a long story short, we did an exhibition at this cathedral in Edinburgh, and word got around. And to make a long story short, we ended up getting an invitation from the Dean of Canterbury to do something in Canterbury. And having only been here for 2 years at that time, that struck us as quite a profound honor.
And we had a pretty much of a free reign. There was just one condition, that we do something that for the Remembrance Day, to remember the end of the First World War, 1918. It was 2018. So one of the pieces had to take that into represent this in a way or the other.
And so the film clip you're about to see now concerns this major installation we did in the nave of the cathedral.
And it's called Boat of Remembrance.
And it symbolizes the 100 years from 1918 to 2018. Should we go to the clip?
Video?
Should we? Yeah. One, two, three. But if this ball were right here,
Get down steady together. Okay.
Wasn't there was some sound that was missing in that? So are we sound on?
We are back on. What an incredible achievement, remarkable work. The nave piece is so incredible.
You know, there's a nice footnote to this, is when we first went to the cathedral, this was a 2-year process. We started talking in September of 2016, and we opened the show in May of 2018. Is that 2 years? Something like that. And anyway, in the beginning, it was clear, we didn't even dream that we could do anything in the nave. We assumed that the works would be installed here and there outside the nave. And as it happens, the cathedral was beginning a major renovation process, which included redoing the roof. And somebody piped up and said, you realize we're going to have this major scaffolding up underneath the roof. And as a result of them having that scaffolding to redo the roof, we had the structure to be able to create this piece. So it was like, it was a one-shot deal. I doubt anything like that, this will ever happen again until they redo the roof again.
Yeah, probably in a couple of 100 years.
In a few hundred years. So
and
we fell in by chance.
yeah, and the amphors, each of those amphors is about 1 meter tall, and there are 100 of them, and the length of this piece is 20 meters.
65 feet.
Wow.
And one other thing, and then we can move on, but the positioning of the amphors conforms precisely to the proportion of the boats that, for example, you've seen in Jim and Kim's gallery, as well as the boat at Ebeltoft in the church.
Amazing. Take one more look at that.
The whole show is called Under an Equal Sky, because we're all, I mean, the sky is the same for all of us. I mean, you can't change it. It's just there, and we're all equal under it.
In theory, and we would like to believe.
But it is so poignant in reference to the pandemic, too. It really speaks of that.
Yeah.
This photo at this angle, it looks like a big, beautiful raindrop or something, just a composition of the boat from this angle.
Which reminds me, the anecdote that Jim was mentioning before, there are a lot of volunteers who take people around in Canterbury, and one of them told us a little boy who came and looked up and said, the sky is crying.
Oh.
Yeah.
The commentaries, the cathedral has 600 volunteers who basically run the day-to-day. There are 1 million visitors a year. And we had a couple of kind of, what would you say, not training sessions, but, you know, discussions with large groups of the volunteers to explain to them what the show was about and so forth. And the things that they told us afterwards, the comments that people would make and so forth, was absolutely fascinating. Such diverse views, and you realize that whatever you do as an artist, you know, it's the viewer who's in charge. Whatever the viewer sees is what they see. You may have your own idea, but there are 1 million interpretations.
And this piece is called You, Me, and the Rest of Us. And it's a frame. This one is large. This is 3 meters tall and 1 meter 80 wide, which is what, 10 by, what is 10?
It's about 10 feet by 6 feet, something like that.
No, it's
5.5
10 feet. Oh yeah, maybe 10 by 6, yeah. And there are also 100 pieces in there. And the variety is also, you know, You, Me, and the Rest of Us sort of says it all. In theory, the golden ones should be actually fewer, but it's, you know, again, we're all the same shape, but we're
diverse.
We are diverse.
Some of us have better luck than others. But this piece actually has ended up as in the offices of the Swedish Law Society in Stockholm. They have this wonderful, great hallway, and it's placed there.
And they also gave, when we went there last November, the award for a Human Rights Award was actually given underneath that frame.
Wow, perfect place for that.
Yeah,
nice touch. Yeah.
Here we are at the martyrdom of Thomas Beckett, who was assassinated in 1170. And there were 4 knights on the kings of the orders of the king who murdered him. And these are these knights are, we call them the 4 assassins. They are 4 assassins. And it again brings up the controversy. Were they honorable people? They were just following orders. Reverse the morale or whatever. And they looked rather, rather royal. And
they were aristocracy.
They were aristocracy. And Beckett, he actually knew they were coming to murder him. And he said, you know, this is a house, doors shouldn't be locked. And he said, open the doors. And in they came and murdered him. And there's a few, these pieces are actually permanently at the cathedral because the Archbishop, as well as the Dean of Canterbury, they liked them so much. So we said, okay, you can have them. And the other thing about these pieces, we do design for Venini and we asked for some sponsors for this exhibition. And Venini said, we can't really give you any money, but we can do some work. So what do you want us to do? And we designed these pieces and they made them and here they are. And there will they stay.
They're permanent. It's quite fascinating. They say that the visitors to Canterbury, the principal thing where they all go is to this spot. It's called the martyrdom of Thomas Beckett. That it is something about that event is resonant with the entire cathedral's story over 1,000 years. And it's wonderful that these pieces can stay there and represent the ambiguity around what happened, because as Monica said, these knights were following their king's wishes.
It's interesting to note that the Archbishop wanted to have these permanently in the cathedral. It's almost like an act of forgiveness that he did that. It's really interesting.
Yeah. And you know, in our original concept, we went so many times to that cathedral. It's about a 6-hour journey.
One way.
One way. And I think over the 2 years, we made 5 trips. And we had an idea for this area, which had nothing to do with those niches. And the committee that decides what you can do in the cathedral or not, they all said, nope, you can't do it. The people will get too close to it. It's dangerous and so on. And we were standing there and we were saying, well, what are we going to do? And then suddenly we realized those pedestals were empty.
They were just waiting for us.
The architect 900 years ago put those in for us. You see the platform underneath the piece? That's a steel platform, and underneath the steel platform is felt. Nothing in the exhibition was allowed to touch the surface of the cathedral. Nothing.
There we're back at the Pilgrim's Boat. That's the shrine of Thomas Beckett. And the pilgrims were coming from all over Europe to pay honor to Beckett. And if you can actually see around you can't see it, but they would come on their knees. They would crawl up the stairs on their knees and kneel around it. And the floor has traces. It has a groove in it because of all the knees that made it. But getting back to the boat,
Well,
again, it's the diversity.
yes, but Monica's story about the knees, when you go there and you see in the stones this little groove that goes all the way around in a rectangle, it's pretty incredible that, you know, that's knees that carved out those little grooves over 900, almost 900 years.
Amazing.
And when he was interred at that site, it's no longer there, because when Henry VIII broke with the Pope, his tomb was dug up and, you know, there was a lot of mayhem. So he's actually not actually there anymore. But pilgrims to this day come from all over Europe. And there they are in this little boat.
It's a remarkable exhibition. Now we're going to your home in Wales.
Oh, yeah. So there's where we live. You can see the studio before it was a studio. It was
That's where we're sitting in there right now.
That was a tractor shed. And just hold that picture for a second. You can't quite see all the various outbuildings. But what you're looking at, except for the studio, which isn't there yet, you have 6 centuries of architecture on our property, from the 15th century to the 21st, which is kind of fun.
And there's an orchard which we have to pick apples and plums.
We put the orchard in. That was the first thing we did when we moved here, was we put in about 70 trees. It's nice. This is what they call a Dutch barn. I don't really know why they call it a Dutch barn, but it's these rounded roofs, steel frames, sort of a very common architectural building that was used in sort of mid-20th century. So they're quite common around here. So in effect, we saved the structure and built a new building inside it.
So the image on the right is the before, and we have the image on the left, which is construction in progress.
Yes.
Then we go to the finished building.
That's a finished building.
Nearly.
That's but yellow tube is the gas line that we pulled up from main gas.
By complete chance, we're about 100 and 200 meters from a main natural gas line. And so we were able to pull the line up to the studio, which was a real break, a major break for us. That's
About
kind
2
of,
years ago.
that's maybe 2 or 3 years ago, yes.
So
So the donkeys, Monica and I have known each other for almost 41 years. And throughout all that time, Monica's always said, I love donkeys. I'd love to have donkeys. So finally, after living for 35 years or whatever in small apartments and so on, and we decided to go on this crazy adventure and come to Wales.
And a big birthday surprise one day.
Me and the assistants went out. We tromped over. We did quite a lot of research, and I thought we'll get one sweet little donkey. Well, no one will give you one donkey. You have to have 2, because they don't tolerate being solo. They need to be together. So 2 donkeys were introduced to the family.
And in the back, you see the roof of our house and the view across the valley to the other side.
We are incredibly lucky here, and we try every day to think of it and remember it. It's a wonderful locality. I'm not so sure about the nation with Brexit, but that's another problem. The local place where we live is really a wonderful spot.
No, little studio. So we're sitting in the corner to the right behind.
We're literally sitting as if we took the picture, where you see us now facing the other way.
Right.
You're looking down into the hot shop from our office design work area. Where you see all the little windows, on the other side of that wall is the cold shop. Now the picture is flipped and you're looking, oh yeah.
There we go.
You're looking from the hot shop into the
Work area.
the office area. And that frame actually was also in Edinburgh, the one you see on the right.
Yes,
so
it was.
That
It
picture
was.
is from 2016, I guess.
Yes.
The one to the right. Not even finished. Hot shop.
Just go
shop.
back for 1 second to that hot shop. I love to tell the anecdote. You see the beautiful floor? We've always insisted on having wood floors in our studio. And this time the surface was pretty big. We didn't know if we could do it. And then we heard about this company that builds ballet floors, theater floors, gymnasiums, all sorts. And they often have to take up old floors. Well, of course, those floors are done without nails through them. So when you take up the floor, the wood is like new. And our floor is an old basketball court from a school somewhere up in Scotland. But the wood was like new.
Fantastic. Great space.
And that's the cold shop, and the windows on the other side is the hot shop.
Yeah. It stop me if I'm repeating myself, but it's always fascinated me that, so on the other side of that wall, you're blowing hot glass, 2,000 degrees, you all know the story, and then the next day you come in, you take it out of the annealer, you move it over to the cold shop, and you're doing this cutting on it with cold diamond wheels and water running down. They're two mediums, two métiers that are completely different one from the other. And yet they
complement each other.
They complement each other and allow us to do what we do.
And you've created this situation where you could keep working throughout the pandemic, which made this show possible.
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah.
You know, the show we would have had to cancel if the assistants had to stay home. You know, we wouldn't have dared have them come up, or we wouldn't have been allowed to. They wouldn't have been allowed to come up here.
Yeah, we would have to put them on furlough.
We'd have had to furlough them. So we're lucky, and we know it.
We're lucky too to have you and to have your time and creative spirit here with us in the gallery, and to share this time with you and all our friends at the AACG and anyone who happens to see this afterwards. So thank you.
Thank you, both of you, and thank you.
Thank you
Meryl.
both for your great work.
Thank you.
And to Marilee again, thank you. And to the AACG again for all your support.
Thank you. It's members like you that makes it wonderful for everyone. And Monica and Philip, so nice to see you again. And Kim and Jim, thank you so much for sharing this today and for leading us through this. And thank all my AACG members for sticking with us. It's wonderful. I will post this on YouTube on the Art Alliance for Contemporary Glass channel. So everyone stay safe, and we will see you next week.
Marilee, Jim, and
Thank you.
Gary is the